All right, welcome back. And this is what we got to mess around with. An old 9-inch RCA black and white TV, date of manufacture 1976. Got this purely by accident. They're working on some of the roads in my neighborhood, and so everyone's having to take an alternate route to get out of the neighborhood, which took me over a few streets. I thought I was going to turn down an alley and get out of the neighborhood a little quicker, but that turned out not to be the case. Instead, I noticed that there was a pile of stuff laying out by a guy's garage, and right on top was this thing. And so I liked the size of it. If it would have been probably any bigger, I wouldn't have picked it up. But the size of it was pretty small, pretty compact. So I picked it up and brought it back. Hooked it up. Well, I hooked it up after I initially had to repair the power cord, and I'll show you that in just a bit. But this is the problem that it has, and we're going to be taking a look at this and see what we can do with it. It's been a few years for me for an old CRT TV, but I probably still got enough marbles in my head to figure this out. It looks like, from what I can tell here, some type of yoke deflection problem, some sort of capacitor problem maybe. So let me get the camera repositioned, then I'll bring you in for a closer look of this. Stand by. All right, bringing you in for a closer look at the old RCA. First, let me show you the back of the unit. Got our model, serial, and date of manufacturer. And there's a few adjustments on the back, one for vertical hold and horizontal hold. And then there's a slot here for the power cord. This is an AC/DC model. The cord that I got with it was the AC cord, although it was cut off right up to the boot of the connector. Also, this model had an optional battery that would attach to the bottom of it. That's not something that I got. It wasn't attached to the TV when I got it. I'll show you the cord first of all. I've already made kind of a field repair on it, but they had cut this off to the point to where I had to kind of cut away some of the rubber material to get down to where the conductors were and attach a cord to it, heat shrink it, seal it up, and tape it up. There's a switch here, and this switch determines whether you're going to do AC, battery, or 12 volts external. And depending on what position that switch is in will depend on whether this notch right here will fit. This is the AC cord, so it will only fit on here in one way, and it can only go that way, because otherwise if that lever were down in the DC position, of course that won't go there. So anyway, interesting little way that they had to do it. No automatic switching, you had to kind of switch it yourself. Just kind of looking this thing over, most definitely it belonged to a smoker, which is not anything new to me. I mean, lots of guys that had vintage audio in the 70s smoked, and so you see a lot of nicotine residue in that. One of the first things that kind of caught my eye was the flyback transformer, which this is what produces the high voltage in the TV. I'll be the first to admit that this particular type of flyback I'm not real familiar with. Most all of the CRT based televisions that I've worked on in my career were all the type that used that integrated high voltage transformer that was like a solid plastic package and mounted directly onto the circuit board. Another thing is the high voltage lead coming from the flyback right here. I don't know if I can get you in there to see that or not. Let's see. In all of the, I'll use the word modern CRT based TVs, there would be a rubber cap that would go around this to where you wouldn't have access to see the wire leads going into the picture tube. Because at this stage, if you have the back off of it and you stick your finger there, I guess if you were stupid enough to stick your finger there, there might be a pretty good argument that you shouldn't be working on these anyway. But anyway, they would later put rubber caps there, so you know you couldn't get to the high voltage lead without actually taking off that rubber cap. Just kind of looking this bad boy over. This is going back to the old mechanical tuner days. There's VHF and UHF tuners in it, and some of the circuitry I do recognize some of it. As far as like the IF section and things like that, you can kind of tell, like IF cans, tuning, audio tuning maybe. Looks like maybe right down here we may have the vertical output section maybe. I don't know that for a fact, but as we get into it a little further, maybe. Another thing is looking at this, and again, this would have not been something in any of the TVs that I messed with in my day, but there's an old two-stage filter cap here, and I would imagine that that would be one of the first areas I'll want to take a look at to see if there's anything going on there. So I think the first thing that I want to do with this is, I know based on the cord that was cut off and the plug still attached to it when I picked it up out of the garbage, that the top two pins of this, the two that are the farthest apart, are actually the AC, because we already obviously had that up and going. So I'm assuming that the bottom two are DC. So I think what we'll do is maybe throw an ohm meter on that, look for the ground pin, and let's jack in 12 volts to it and see if the picture looks any different, because then all of a sudden we're probably going to be bypassing the mainline filter cap, and the direct current will just energize the set with its own filtration, and we won't be dependent upon this. So let's see if we can do that and see what the picture looks like from that point. So hang on a sec. All right, let's see what we can identify with this. I'm using just a chassis ground here. I assume we should probably put that switch in the 12 volt position maybe. About the power switch. This switch to the ground. Yeah, okay. That seems a little low to me. I would think that that would be a little bit higher, but it might be going through some kind of choke or something. I don't know. So I think I know enough about it to know that the power supply is protected. So what we'll do is we'll use this. This is kind of a homebrew 12 volt 10 amp power supply. I made out of a 16 volt power supply. Actually, I didn't really have to do anything on the side of this. There's a potentiometer for voltage adjustment, so I just ran it down to 12.5 and away we go. So let's get a power cord for that, hook it up, and even though this doesn't have a current, meter on it, it does have a light that will tell us if we're starting to draw a really high load. So you know what, let's use the official test leads here. Hopefully that's in the shot for you so you can see. That's good enough. All right, let's make sure. So we're thinking that the bottom left is going to be the ground. So keeping these from shorting together is going to be something I'll want to try to do. And they're already shorted together. So. Okay. I have to come from behind, maybe. All right, we'll start with the power off, power supply on. We got some noise. Oh, looks a little better there. Obviously, no analog channels available anymore, but right now, just seeing some snow and some raster is a positive sign. So, okay. So I guess what this tells us really is kind of what I had suspected, that filtration on the 120 volt line, probably that dual stage cap, is at the very least one stage of it's probably bad, but maybe more than that, and there could be more caps that are responsible for that portion of the power supply that are bad as well. So let's get the meter over here and see if we can check that out and see. And the meter, we know, doesn't like the wireless mic, but maybe we can get away with it today. No, there is nothing happening there. And there is nothing happening on either stage, so at the very least, that cap is bad. Okay, so let me look into what the values of that are. I obviously don't have a dual stage cap to pop in there, but what we will do is we'll jumper some in and we'll see what it looks like. Stand by. All right, I got that loose and turned around to where we can see what that is. And it looks like one stage of it is 200 mic at 175 volt, and the other one's 250 mic at 175 volt. And they are identified by the triangle, and I don't know what that is, but hopefully it's identified here. Okay. Well, I would love to see a triangle on one side of this thing. But I don't see anything. Okay. All right, stand by and let me look into this. Maybe I'm missing something here. Okay, getting it cleaned off with a Q-tip and some Windex. Now you can kind of make out the symbol, or at least a triangle. So the red line is the triangle, which according to what we read over here, the triangle is the 250 mic one, right? Yeah. Okay, so here's what I got from my parts. The closest I can come is 470 at 200 brand new, and then a good used one out of a switch mode power supply, which is 220 at 250. Right now, I'm just kind of in the stages of wanting to test it just to see if this is it. Obviously, I'm not going to just tack in a couple of caps and leave it that way. So let's get these put in. We'll just jumper them in with jumper wires and then see what our picture looks like, if it's improved, which at this point it certainly couldn't hurt it, because both stages of that cap is gone. So let's do that. Let's jumper both sides in and see what happens. Let me put you back here. And I set up there's a mirror right there. That's an old mirror I used to use from my TV days. That way you don't have to flip the TV around. You can just see what your picture looks like while you're working in the back of it. So now we need the jumpers. So I'm going to assume that was the negative side. And I'm going to try to do this without creating a problem. I probably should put a tag of solder right there. There's no way I'll be able to keep them together if I don't do that. Okay. Obviously, we're just doing testing with this. I mean, if this was some customer's unit, if it was a customer's unit, I'd still do this just to test it, but I wouldn't. Obviously, I would implement a mounting, or I will implement a mounting bracket of some sort to put the caps in to keep them kind of isolated away from everything else. So the 220 is the one we're using for the 200, right? Which is this guy. Okay. And then the shared common, it looks like just the frame of the cap is the negative for both of them. So, and then we know the red one was the triangle, which is going to be the 250, and that's the one we're using the 470 for. That's too high. I wouldn't use that a permanent deal. It'll work, but if I'm going to use something that's a little different, I don't want it to be that far off. That's a little too far off. So, all right. So now let's find our cord and plug it back in. Remembering to move our switch back to the AC position. Power off. Okay, let's see. Okay. Well, that makes obviously a world of difference. Now that the mainline filter caps are replaced, I'll bring you in so you can see. The camera's catching some kind of weird thing going on with the screen, but there isn't a black line in the middle of the screen. It's a solid snow raster. Okay, so and what we'll need to do is we'll need to find us some caps and figure out a way to mount those in. And once I have got that figured out, then we'll hook a source up to it and see if we can see a picture on it. I would assume at this point the controls probably need to be cleaned. Most definitely need to be cleaned, and so that's something that'll have to be done. But for our garbage TV, we're chugging along pretty good. Stand by. Yeah, I seen a guy on a couple guys on YouTube do this, and I've always been dying to try it. So we'll use the old capacitor container as the housing for the new capacitors. So let me get this taken apart, and we'll go from there. I'm hoping it's as easy as it looked in the video, because I still want to kind of use the top cap as the connecting point for it. So let me see what I can do about getting this thing apart, and then we'll go from there. All right, welcome back, and we're going to fast forward to the weekend, since the last time we were messing around with the old RCA TV we got out of the trash heap. At that time, we cut the old aluminum cap apart with a Dremel tool. I'd never done the cool procedure I've seen other guys do, just stuffing it with regular old electrolytics. And so at that time I didn't have what I needed, so what I wound up doing is ordering up a couple of 270 mic at 200 volt caps, two identical ones, which will take the place of the 200 mic and 250 mic at 175 volts each. So I got to thinking about stuffing those in this aluminum coffin here, and decided that I wanted some kind of like isolation from the sides. So what I did was kind of fashion some old heat shrink tubing into like a sleeve that I just put down in here. And my idea is really just to take the two caps and butt them together, because they got a shared ground anyway. Put them down in there like so, and then we'll attach wires and heat shrink it, and then seal the can up when we're done. So that's kind of the working idea now. So let me get the soldering iron heated up, and we'll start working on that. Hopefully you don't mind if I'm having a beer, since it is a garbage pile TV. So give me a second, and we'll get those soldered up. All right, let's get our wires tinned up, and we'll get that part taken care of. I cut out 3 pieces of heat shrink for this. Now let's see if we can get these attached in some graceful way. And of course the heat shrink falls off right away. And I'm sure my hand is in the way as well. I'm thinking the red wire probably needs a little more solder, so we want it to kind of adhere real nice to the other side, or to the other lead of the cap. So let's tag that up a little more. when you want these to look a certain way, it's kind of a, you know, I'm one of those people that when it comes to soldering, I'm always looking for some sort of mythological perfection. So I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to obtain that here, since I'm soldering them straight to the other one kind of vertically here. Or at least I don't think I'll be able to do it without fastening one to the other while I do it, but I'm going to try. That looks pretty good. In the grand scheme of things, I know they're not coming apart. It's just one of those things that's in my head that, oh my God, you didn't do it good enough. They're going to come apart. There we go. I had it and then let it go. Let's try it again. I'm going to keep messing around, burning the insulation up on the wire. Oh, that looks good there. Let me hit the white one more time here. Yeah, I think I'm going to be happy with that. I'm going to bring you in, let you take a look, see what your opinion is of this. Looks pretty solid. I don't think it's going to come apart, so. All right, let's throw the heat shrink on. All right, after everything is said and done, that's going to be the final product, final version of this. And once I push these guys down inside there, the lid should go on without much issue. And then we'll tape it up with a piece of the aluminum tape. So again, probably overthought it a little bit, but also I put a rubber pad in the bottom of this can too. So kind of just maintaining more of that isolation. Not that it would be an issue, but just wanted to try to do a nice job of it. So all right, let's get the can sealed up, and then we'll fire the TV back up and see. Again, I can't imagine it not making some improvement, but there could still be more things here, capacitor-wise, that could give us more problems. But that was definitely a first step for sure. So let me get this camera mounted back where it's supposed to be, and then we'll pick back up on it. Stand by. All right, fast forward another week, back with our little junk pile TV, and what would have been an easy just check and see if we've got a picture and how good that picture is turned out to be a pretty big malpractice adventure for me. So let me take you in here, take a look at the picture that we have. And this was what I was using for the source, and we'll get to that in a minute. You can see the lines at the top of the picture, and you can see them disappear. And you can see them come back. And you can see them disappear again. And what it was is that I didn't catch this pattern of the lines coming and going. So I had mistakenly thought that there was something going on in the vertical section of the TV, which originally I misidentified as this part of the circuitry being the vertical. I think I was too caught up in the fact that most of the TVs that, all the TVs that I worked on had modern type vertical outputs, which was just a single package chip. This obviously is not that. This looks like maybe the audio section. Again, no service manual, I'm kind of just winging it. But this board is the actual vertical output. It's an upright board mounted in a socket. And so I was doing some checks on that board live, which just voltage checks. The probe slipped, and needless to say, those two transistors right there, I shorted the one and it went into vertical collapse, taking out the other one as well. And both of those transistors are OEM GE transistors or RCA transistors. On the one, they put it in series with a 1 ohm resistor. I'm assuming they did that in an effort to fuse the line voltage going into the transistor. I don't know that for a fact, but that's what I would assume. Anyway, I was able to take these ancient numbers and reverse cross them and replace the pair with a 2N3904 and a 2N3906, and it's working just fine. But these lines, if I would have caught the pattern of them coming and going, then I would have known actually what's causing that problem. I probably should have known that anyway, just because of the rare pattern of the lines, but didn't pick up on that right away. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to get it back together, and we will do a final test on some period appropriate material for this guy and put an end to it. So stand by and let me get that going.
Of a fateful trip that started from this tropic port aboard this tiny ship. The mate was a mighty sailing man, the skipper brave and sure by path.
All right, I'm not so sure how much of that we'd be able to get away with, but that's going to be our period correct material for the 1976 TV. I guess the show's a little older than 76, but I'm quite sure I was watching it in reruns in 1976, including on a black and white TV. So here's how we get in the picture. Old school DVD player with a composite out going into the Turk modulator, and then 75 ohm cable into the transformer, into the screw terminals of the TV, and of course the TV on channel 3. The lines that eluded me were caused by this. This is the first disc that I put in the player to get a picture and see what we're looking like. And what I didn't realize was the disc was protected with that macro vision. And what that would do is if you hooked your DVD player up through your VCR, which is basically the same scenario as we got going on with this Turk modulator, it would come in composite audio and video and go out modulated RF. They did something, I don't remember, I remember reading something about it where they screwed with the AGC, it did something with the AGC where the TV didn't see it if you hooked directly to the TV, but the VCR would. And as I remember it, the picture would go from light to dark. And I don't remember lines in the picture, but for whatever reason, it's a very old TV and we're trying to hook it up to some fairly modern things, and so I guess any scenario is possible. The parts that we changed out, this was the only thing that was really bad. This was a cap in the power supply that I changed out, upgraded to something a little bit more modern. Everything in this cup right here was technician error, self-induced. The two electrolytics and the two transistors are from the vertical output board. The two electrolytics were only on the fringes of being bad, but since I already had to replace the two transistors that I smoked, I went ahead and replaced those as well. The only thing you didn't see in the video was the first time I tried to put the two halves of the cap that I cut apart to restuff. The first time I tried to put those two halves together, they wouldn't fit because the leads on the electrolytics were too long. So I had to go back in, trim down the leads of the electrolytics, resolder the wires, and reheat shrink everything. And then I was able to get the two halves comfortably together and put the aluminum tape on it. Other than that, when I picked the TV up out of the garbage, it was on a garbage pile, but it had previously been in the mud and in the dirt. And so there was dirt all over everything, all over the screen, all over the knobs. And so there was quite a bit of cleaning involved just to get it to the point to where I was able to work on it, or get it to the point where I wanted to work on it, I guess is a more proper way to say it. So I hope you guys have enjoyed the video for the 9-inch AC/DC 1976 RCA black and white TV. And the next thing we'll go back to is audio equipment, of course, but this was a fun little detour from that to work on something a little different. So thanks for watching. Okay, a real quick end note to this is, looking back through the video, I didn't even include a picture of the cap after we got it all sealed back up with the aluminum tape. And it doesn't look too bad. It's a pretty good first effort. And would have really liked to have used the internal connections and not have to put the wires through the top plate there. But unfortunately, when I twisted out the old paper and aluminum concoction in there, it broke the terminals right off with it. So, also I wanted to show you this. This is the vertical output board, and in the process of working on that, I didn't really do it. It was just a frail socket connector. I've seen that happen before, but it split right down the center there. And so, looking at from this side, there's a metal standoff here that's used to kind of steady the board while it's in the socket. And I noticed that on the way that connects, is it connects onto the actual socket itself from one side to the other. And so I was thinking it would kind of, if I made some kind of a metal clasp for that side, it would kind of pull the split pieces together. And so I did that, and then used a dental instrument to move those connections a little closer to the other side, so when the board sets in there, it'll get a little bit better bite to it. And that worked out very well. The final thing was when I was changing out that cap right there, my soldering iron came into contact with these wires and slightly damaged the insulation. It wasn't anything that was down to the conductor, but I did want to fix it, so I took them off of that charging switch and slid some heat shrink over those. So that's pretty much it. This video has went on long enough, so I just wanted to throw that in at the end.